So do humans make up words and believe them? Well, the short answer is yes, and that's what this video is about, because many of my other videos talk about the left brain making up stories and then us believing in them. And as the Thomas theorem puts it, things believed to be true can be true in their consequences. So even if a word is made up and doesn't exist anywhere in the physical world, that is the world that can be consciously experienced, it can still have real world consequences. So if you think you're the manager, yes, the word manager is a made up word. And it's made up because I can't directly experience it. I can look at you, see your meat suit, see your shoes and your watch, but I can't see manager. That is something that is a social agreement among minds. But if it's taken seriously, and everyone thinks you're the manager, you walk up to someone and say, you're an employee and you're fired. And everyone just believes in it. And it sort of works and has its own social constructed reality. Now, this is in contrast to some real words, which is to say, words that do point to real things that are consciously experienceable. Things like the word lake, moon, sun, water, fire. These are all words that point to real things. And by real, I mean things that are consciously experienceable. And even animals use this. And so if I say walk, our dog knows exactly what that word means. And animals will use different sounds to alert the other animals that some dangerous predator is approaching. So have you ever heard of the word drapetomania? Probably not. It's a made-up word. But in 1851, Dr. Cartwright made this word up to suggest that it was a mental illness such that slaves that wanted to experience their freedom were suffering from drapetomania. This is a mental illness because in his left brain view, the conditions of slavery were so comfortable that someone would have to be mentally ill to want to escape. So looking back on that, it's pretty easy to see that drapetomania is an absolutely made-up word. But can we apply that same reasoning, that same experience, that lack of experiential conscious experience, can we apply that to words like anxiety and depression, the two great plagues of modern humans? Well, in my 20s, if you had told me that anxiety is a made-up word, I would have gotten really angry, and I would have said, anxiety is the only reality that I know, so don't tell me it's made up. Well, before I go on with this, let me give a short description of the epinephrine study, Schachter and Singer's study in the late 60s, early 70s. It would have never been okayed by any ethics committee nowadays. But the short of it is they injected people with epinephrine. Now, some people were told to expect the symptoms, the side effects, which is an elevated nervous system, so your heart starts racing, you're sweating. But the other half were not told that these were side effects. And they were in a waiting room, and the real experiment was all made up, and it was something about doing an eye test for vision, and they were actually getting a vitamin shot. But here you are, your heart's racing, you're sweating, and you have no idea why. Well, the two-factor theory of emotion suggests that emotions, all emotions, including anxiety and depression, are comprised of two different elements. One is the physiological component, in this case arousal, and the other is a cognitive label. So it's a story, an interpretation. And as you sat there sweating with a racing heart, there was an actor in the room, a Confederate, who you thought was another subject. In one condition, they were euphoric and happy. They were playing around with these like paper footballs and laughing. In another, they were angry, so they were just kicking things, upset about the experiment. Well, you spend 15 minutes with one or the other of these people, and then the experimenter comes along and assesses your emotion at the time. Well, sure enough, the people who were with the happy person assumed that they were happy. The person who were with the angry person assumed that they were angry. And so you can see how made up some of our emotions are. They're just stories that we make up as an explanation for what's going on around us. So, could anxiety and depression be the same? Well, one way we can look at this is metaphorical. And so the word depression actually started off as something that was physically, consciously experienceable. Depression was an indentation, or it was to take something and put it on a lower status. Those are experienceable. And so those are things that are well within what we might call reality. But then we turned it into something that it wasn't. And so we could use these metaphorically. We could say there's a bit of depression going on. in the sense that maybe my overall body is at a lower level than it was the previous day. But that's not how we use it. We say, I am depressed or I am anxious. So we don't use these as metaphors. We use them as things that are in the real world, but really they're two made up words here. One is the I, and I've talked about this in a couple recent videos, how I is a made up word, because you can look in the mirror, you can see your face, but you cannot see to whom the face belongs. You can feel your heart beating. So if we talk about anxiety, you can feel your heart racing. You can see and feel yourself sweating, but you cannot see what's causing the heart rate or the sweating. In other words, supposedly it's anxiety. That's a story we make up. But you don't know that because you cannot directly experience the anxiety. And for something to be part of the real world, it must be something that is directly experienced. Now, this is very close to what Thomas Szasz talked about in the 60s. He came up with a book called The Myth of Mental Illness. And that's exactly what he was trying to get at. That physical illnesses are things that are tangible. They're things that you can consciously experience. So something like cancer is something that people can see for themselves. They see the tumor. But when it comes to mental illnesses, he pointed out this is really a contradiction. These words don't belong together because illnesses are part of the physical world. They're part of the things that can be consciously experienced. Mental illnesses cannot be consciously directly experienced, as I just pointed out. Therefore, they don't exist. That doesn't mean they don't cause suffering. And again, that's a really important part of this because things believed to be true are true and their consequences. So it could be our belief when we say, I am depressed, I am anxious. It's our belief in those made up words that is truly causing our suffering, because experiencing depression directly, consciously, in the same way that you experience fire or water, it just doesn't happen. And please leave a comment if you feel like there's some way you can directly experience these. And if we look at the DSM, this is the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual for Mental Illnesses, it has had an exponential increase since its creation in all these mental illnesses. And the question is, are these being discovered or are they being invented? Are these all just a bunch of made up words that us humans are susceptible to believing in? And by believing in them, they become true in their consequences.